Hello, my name is Olu Osha. I like talking about American presidents, and of course, I discuss American laws and international human rights law. Today, I want to discuss the broad consequences of war. I've been following, the updates and the news since the onset of the war against Iran by the combination of U.S. and Israeli forces. Now, I've done other videos in which I've discussed, what's going on, and my goal is not to be a news reporter, because my goal is it really is to be a historian, discuss history, and history helps us to understand, the present, our present times, and to be able to make calculated decisions about the future. Some people think it can help us predict or prognosticate regarding the future. Right now, we are in a state of war. America can still pull out, but first of all, America, is violate has violated international law. I've done videos in discussing how America violated international law. So we didn't follow what's called jus ad bellum. Interestingly, I'd done a video a long time ago about, not long time ago, sometime this year, in the aftermath of the kidnapping of the Venezuelan president by U.S. forces. I did a video, discussing jus ad bellum. The jus ad bellum is justification for going to war, right? So it's within our United Nations Charter. Every war eventually ends with negotiations, right? So there are principles for going to war, and one of them is justa causa. That's just cause. There has to be a justifiable reason for a country going to war. America had no just cause. However, Iran now has just cause for going to war because they're now acting in self-defense. They were invaded. Their president was assassinated, so they're not backing down, and so they are acting in self-defense from a foreign attack and from the assassination of their presidents in violation, U.S. and Israeli violation of their sovereignty. America has tried to say, well, that the reason why they attacked Iran was to prevent them in acquiring a nuclear weapon. So I'm not going to go into the discussions of whether that is true or not. But let's consider, I've done videos talking about the uh, the greatness of the Iranian civilization. They're the ancient Persians. They go back 5,000 years. The first, many Christians like to pivot, like to harp on Jewish people as a chosen people, or uh, the ones who gave us, the Abrahamic religions and the great monotheisms of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Now, in the Bible, we know that, in fact, the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, praised a Persian, Cyrus the Great. I've done a video discussing that. Cyrus the Great, who was uh, praised as a Messiah and an anointed one in the Hebrew Bible, and he was one who actually liberated the Jewish people from their Babylonian captivity in the 6th century BC. Um, Now, in terms of the great monotheisms, the first monotheism, theistic religion. That's a religion that professes one God, right? One Creator God. Is it the Ahura Mazda? Was actually Zoroastrianism, and their God is Ahura Mazda. Zoroastrianism, which is still practiced in Iran today. So Iran, the Persians had the first great monotheism. So my point, I'm going into arguing that, okay, these are people that believe in their greatness. The world acknowledges their greatness, their old great civilization, right? There's no Iranian today, whether it's an Iranian American who was against the Islamic Republic, or an Iranian living in Iran, there's no Iranian American today who's going to tell you they do not believe Iran should, uh, that they do not believe that they do not support Iran's uh, possession of nuclear weapons, right? Because they would think them. They, you know, there's several nations that have nuclear weapons today. India has nuclear weapons. Pakistan, China, America, right? Several North Korea, several countries have nuclear weapons today. Russia, right? Nobody has used it. The only country that's ever used nuclear weapons on another nation is the United States in 1945, right? Against Japan, against bombing civilian populations in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, in which over 210,000 people at least died during that year. There were consequences. There was a fallout. My purpose in this doing this video is actually talk about the consequences of war. Uh, and I wanted to first of all get that issue of jus ad bellum, out of the way, the justa causa, the lack of just cause for going to war. That's for America, right? We didn't have just cause for attacking Iran. Saying that we wanted to prevent Iran from possessing nuclear weapons, that's in fact the attack upon their sovereignty is actually justification to possess nuclear weapons as a deterrent because there's several countries that possess nuclear weapons. America has not attacked them. America has not attacked North Korea. They possess nuclear weapons. America does not attack Russia. America does not attack China, right? Even though America has a stronger military force than all these nations, America does not attack any of these nations, right? So Iran has a great civilization. Israel has nuclear weapons, right? Iranian scientists are brilliant. One of the things, it's in a way, it appears that in fact, um, nations seem to uh, nations, the possession of nuclear weapons seems to be a bragging right for intelligent nations these days. That okay, it's a sign that, well, that they have smart scientists, they have the technological know-how, they're technologically advanced. So Iran, with all its brilliant scientists, its history of affecting science, astronomy, mathematics, the great sciences and knowledge systems, of the world as a great civilization that's still existing today. I don't think I don't think there can be a case, right, to be made that would convince any Iranian scientist or Iranian educated Iranian that Iran should not possess its own nuclear weapons as well. There's no nation that has used nuclear weapons as an aggressor, right, just to go and destroy civilizations, because we know nuclear weapons, the nuclear warfare will actually bring about Armageddon. It will be the end of the world. Nobody wants to do that, right? Iranians are not going to do. Iranians have demonstrated, right, that because they have a 5,000 year civilization, they've demonstrated that they want to leave and they want to keep living, right? They're not going to get into a nuclear war with anybody, but they're proud people, right? I know Iranians because I've lived with Iranians. I've lived with Iranian Americans. So I don't think it's the attack on uh, the assault, the assassination of the Iranian uh, government's leadership. About 40 Iranians were killed. The constant, repeated assaults, attacks by the United States government. It's insulting. It's undignifying, right? It's it's just providing justification for them to have nuclear weapons, right? Because Iran hasn't attacked America directly, and that's like such a huge insult, so it's just providing them justification, reason to have nuclear weapons. to be able to be self-governing, to be able to maintain their sovereignty. So that's not a justification to actually go to war, right? It's not justa causa. First of all, there was no evidence that they were building nuclear weapons. They've maintained their right to use uh, nuclear to have a nuclear program for peaceful means, right? Uh, nuclear programs can be used towards peaceful means for energy and other scientific purposes, and that's their aims. Iran is a signatory of NPT, that's Non-Proliferation Treaty, which Israel, interestingly, is not. People who signed the NPT, they are vowing to use not to to they're disavowing the use of nuclear for aggressive means, or they're disavowing their participation in accumulating, amassing nuclear weapons, right, for non-peaceful means. So, and Iran is a signatory of NPT. In any event, what I wanted to quickly discuss were the consequences of war. There are many uh, bad consequences of war. War is a very costly, dehumanizing um, uh, activity in the affairs of mankind. It's during war. It was America was in a state of war with Japan when it tragically dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which which caused the death of over 210,000 Japanese civilians, and of course it's uh, had all the long term consequences, right? It created, other people died later on from radiation. There were birth defects later on. There were cancers. You know, just a lot of tragic fallout from detonating uh, an atomic bomb in 1945. This is now 2026. Instigating a war in the Middle East can escalate into a third world war. So we don't want to see the use of nuclear arms, right? Iran is an ally of two nuclear powers, at least two nuclear powers, China and Russia, and no one wants to instigate them into escalate, getting involved in this and creating a global war, another world war. So that's a major consequence. Apart from the use of nuclear arms, there are other consequences. In the past, there's been use of chemical weapons, right? America has violated jus ad bellum laws. Now, there's something else called jus in bello, that's conduct of war. Jus in bello, for instance, prohibits the use of chemical weapons, biological weapons in warfare. But the thing is, Iran is going to fight an asymmetric warfare. They're going to fight unconventionally with America just because they don't have the sort of military might and capacity or resources that America has. But it's determined to fight and to win and to prevail, right? Especially since in the Iran-Iraq war between 1980 and 1988, Iran's convinced that it was America that supplied Saddam Hussein, Iraq, the materials and technology to create the chemical weapons that were used against Iranians. So Iran can be looking for its payback. Who will be exposed to that? American soldiers. So American soldiers can likely be exposed to chemical weapons and biological weapons, right? Till today, we don't know if COVID was really a biological uh, testing of a biological weapon, right? They're like nations who probably test for biological weapons, although this is prohibited. But the thing about war is, uh, combatants are going to pivot on whatever advantage, whatever means they can use to get the upper hand. Humanity goes out of the window during in wars, right? America used chemical weapons during the Vietnam War, right? What was it rainbow herbicides, use of Agent Orange, Agent Blue, right? So there were those herbicidal warfare. Although America claims that they didn't use these herbicides on directly on populations, on people, right, on living beings. They used them on crops. About 5 million acres of farmlands in Vietnam, for amongst the Viet Cong. They claimed they wanted to starve them. They wanted to, decimate their resources, their access to food supply. Which is another evil, right? Starvation, trying to use starvation on your adversary, right? That's something else that's prohibited in war, right? In the Nigeria has had a civil war, the Nigerian Biafra Civil War between 1967 and 1970. The federal Nigerian federal forces blockaded the Biafrans, right, and subjected them to starvation. I actually studied this. I did it in War and Peace and Human Rights in International Human Rights Law at Oxford, right? So that's a sad thing. So there are terrible things that go on. There'll be starvation, subjecting civilians to to civilian populations to starvation. It's illegal. It's contrary to jus in bello. But if people like America, big if big nations like America and Israel cannot be relied on to adhere to jus in bellum, right? Jus et bellum. That's uh, justification for going to war, including justa causa, just cause. How can they be expected to adhere to the laws of the conduct of war? That's jus in bello. So these things can be expected. That okay, there will be use of chemical weapons, there'll be use of biological weapons on civilian populations, on our soldiers. There'll be the use of starvation on civilian populations, right? During the Vietnam War, the crops were poisoned. It eventually had consequences on the Vietnamese and on Americans as well. They say the use of Agent Orange was what caused Parkinson's disease, cancers, type 2 diabetes, and other ailments, right? The Vietnamese ended up having, and American soldiers, they ended up having children with deformities, right? Birth defects. So these are consequences of war. These are consequences of going to war. You know, there's genocide, right? There's ethnic cleansing. Other rogue soldiers, rogue operators will arise and then start to execute their invidious animosity towards clans, tribal groups, and there will now be a fight for resources. Genocides escalate during war. The Armenian genocide that the Armenians allege that the Ottoman Empire instigated, perpetrated, occurred during the First World War between 1915 and 1917. About 1.2 million Armenians were killed in the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire, was disbanded at the end of the First World War. And now their base was Turkey, so that's Turkey. Turkey was the seat of the Ottoman Empire, right? So there was genocide. The Holocaust was escalated during the Second World War as well, under Nazi Germany, in which about 6 million Jews were killed. So genocide occurs during wars. It will be escalated. That's another consequence of war, right? The use of chemical and biological weapons, the use of banned, prohibited weapons, genocide, starvation. Women get raped during wars in Sierra Leone, in West Africa. Women, I know someone who was a kid in Sierra Leone. He told me about how they were raped. You know how his sister almost got raped. How the she just barely escaped getting raped during the Sierra Leonean war. It's something. He was a child when he witnessed this. Barely, they were going to, a whole troop of soldiers were going to rape her. So there are these harsh consequences in war. Already, they said 170 schoolgirls were killed when a school was bombed by the joint U.S. and Israeli forces. They've been, the indiscriminate bombing that they're now undertaking in Iran. Excuse me. You know, and so kids get drafted as child soldiers. In West Africa, many kids were drafted as child soldiers in the civil war in Sierra Leone. 9 year olds, 10 year olds, they get drafted as child soldiers. It happened in Ethiopia as well, in the Ethiopian Eritrean War. Child soldiers get, kids get drafted. It happened in the US Civil War. The South started drafting kids as soldiers because they lacked manpower. So the Confederates started drafting kids as enlisting, child soldiers. So humanity is debased, is brought down, really brought low. There's a degradation of humanity, mankind during war. And this is something that we need to be able to avoid. Already, there's also the economic fallout, economic consequences, because Iran is fighting an unconventional warfare. So it's attacked military bases and the allies in the Gulf areas, right? The GCC nations. GCC nations, that's a Gulf Cooperation Council, made up of at least six or seven Gulf nations. Bahrain, there's United Arab Emirates, there's Saudi Arabia, there's um, Oman. Those countries in the Persian Gulf, those countries that are oil producing, they're Islamic and Arabic nations. So they're called the Gulf Cooperation countries, that they control a tremendous amount of oil, the oil exporting nations. Iran has started attacking them and they've been making a lot of money from oil and tourism. Iran has gone to try to, it's blockaded it's blocked the Gulf of uh, Hormuz, Hormuz, in the so it's like a passage, a little passage where the Gulf nations, right, the oil producing nations, the Gulf area, the Persian Gulf, through which a lot of oil and trade passes. And Iran has blocked that. So this is going to have an economic impact, right? Not just in the Gulf area, as the business is being impeded for the Gulf states, right? The oil producing Gulf states. It's going to end up having repercussions on Americans, on Western economies, and all over the world, right? Already, they said the price of oil jumped over 20%. It's gone up. The last time I checked, it was about at $85 to a barrel. It's going to go beyond that. Fighting a war with, by the way, Iran is the third largest oil producer. Not third largest oil producer. It has the third largest um, proven oil reserves in the world, right? The only countries that have more oil than Iran are Venezuela, which is number one, and then Saudi Arabia, which is number two. It's so interesting that America is in conflict with two major oil produce all two two nations with vast oil reserves, Venezuela and Iran. What's the end game for America? So there's going to be the economy is going to be affected. Global world economies will be affected. The U.S. economy will be affected. America already has $38 trillion in debt. $38 trillion in debt. What is it that? What are we intending to do? You know, are we trying to be gangsters and seize oil to cover our debts? So, I mean, what's really going on? That's not how Americans did business. Americans did business based on good faith and based on skill, right? Based on being talented, not being gangsters. That's not what we touted ourselves to be. That's not what we were propagating you know, our business expertise to be, right? We weren't touting ourselves, parading ourselves as gangsters, right? We're supposed to be responsible, honest brokers, you know. And I'm gonna stop this video here and I'll continue. I need to take a drink. My name is Olu Osha. I'll keep you posted.